Let's do
So
that.
we're recording now, and it looks like just the three of us. And what I might do is outline the I suppose the background and the structure that I had thought might work initially, which was so me being from the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. I'm keen to practice what John Vervaeke is calling Dialogos, the idea that two of us or three of us, or the right amount of people, when we come together in good faith, that something emerges out of the dialectic, I think he calls it. So the way that we talk in good faith to one another, that none of us could have produced on our own, and that is inherently good. And a good dialogos will result in wisdom, which is the highest good.
Good thinking.
Yeah. So, and of course, this was with respect to Simon's contribution to the Discord server vis-a-vis Quakerism and collective presencing. So I had kind of a structure about a couple of questions to get us into that. But since it's just the three of us, I've got no kind of claims to be running this. So Solid, is there something you'd like to see different to that before I sort of do my bit?
No, I think that's pretty cool, and I really don't know anything about Quakerism except just the superficial stuff, and so yeah, I'm just willing to learn right now.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And Simon, perhaps for the recording, shall I do a little introduction of you, or do you want to introduce yourself?
I mean, yeah, sure, I can introduce myself.
Oh no, sorry, for Simon.
No, for me. Okay, great.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well,
yeah.
why don't you?
Probably go ahead. Yeah.
If you'd like to introduce what you have picked up, and then I'll add any important bits.
I would love to. So my initial interest in talking to you was with regards to, I suppose, something that isn't so public for you as such, something that you'd find on your webpage easily, which is Quakerism. But in the course of following that up, what I've learned about you is that you're a professor. I believe that's right. You've got a PhD. You got a PhD?
No professor. Yeah.
Okay. That means you're a doctor.
Theoretically.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So it's Dr. Simon Grant.
A doctor of theory.
Okay, perfect. And that's computer science?
It was a mixture of computer science and psychology, cognitive science. In fact, same area as John Vervaeke, actually, but but earlier than him, and probably not the same area, but the same field of study.
Okay, brilliant. And part of your practice post your successful PhD was to found an organization called CETIS,
we call it, yeah.
CETIS, which seems to be a sort of working at the confluence of technology, learning, and as far as I could see it, human-computer interaction being your specialty, and how that kind of unfolds its way into cognition. Is that a fair?
Well, let me put that in a bit of perspective. CETIS was founded a long time before I came on the scene. I just helped it move from being part of a university setup into its own worker co-op structure. CETIS is mainly it's an educational technology consultancy, and it's mainly these days to do with more data analytics and things like that. But it's always been interested in standardization. and standards, open standards, being the way to coordinate people in the technology world. And the important thing, I think, for me, is that the standardization process is fundamentally a consensus one. When you set up a standard of any sort, technical standard, you have to, well, you have no power over anybody. You have to get people to agree. And in order to get people to agree, you have to understand them. You have to listen, you have to understand their language, what they're talking about, and you have to be able to translate between the different languages. So that's the real interest for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now I'm going to come back to that and do, first of all, that kind of inclusive open standard thing by just quickly following up with Solid, and then I'm going to ask some questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Solid, did you want to introduce yourself and let us know about you? Because part of what I'm interested in is building a bit of community here too.
Oh yeah, well the thing is I really don't know. I don't think I can add much to the conversation about Quakerism and collective principling. So I'm not sure it's any useful real.
That's fine then.
But yeah, I'm just really. Sorry?
I'd be interested to hear I'd be very interested to hear where you're coming from. What's your background and how you're approaching this, basically.
Well, I've been just interested in Peterson and Jung and Vervaeke for like a couple of years now, and philosophy in general. Thanks to Vervaeke mostly, I've been reading up on my philosophy. So yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's good. Okay. Useful start. Thank you.
Oh, well, good. Well, okay. Well, then I might proceed down the path a little bit, and obviously, Solid. If something strikes you, just jump in.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So just quickly, Simon, about, do you prefer Simon or Dr. Grant?
Simon. One of the things you might know about Quakers is that Quakers abjure titles. Quakers really dislike honorifics, and they like to treat people equally, irrespective of their social status. And that's one of the reasons why they don't use honorific titles like Mr. or Mrs. or even Doctor. But Doctor is better than Mr. But preferably not at all. Preferably Simon is just absolutely fine.
Oh, well, that's great. I mean, that not only answers my question, but tells us something about what we're talking about as well. So I have researched a little bit into Quakerism in preparation for our discussion, which is very interesting. I think I'm like quite a lot of people in that Quakerism has a kind of a liminal appearance in the consciousness. So like, oh, it's there and I'll get to it at some stage. However, there isn't a proper focus. And, I noticed when you joined in a conversation how respectful you were of what other people were saying. It was obviously, I'm not sure what the word is. It was obviously in the right spirit, even though you weren't necessarily spending all the time in the world there. And I, at the same time, was looking for some way to contribute. So I wanted to learn more about Quakerism as well. And you also brought in collective presencing, which is a spiritual practice, unless I'm mistaken, which is
wouldn't call it a spiritual practice, but yes, I would leave out the word spiritual.
Right. So do you want to maybe just unfold a piece about Quakerism and collective presencing, or do you prefer a few questions? How would you like to do it?
Okay, I'll give a little introduction then. I came across Quakerism firstly in my student years. And actually, I discovered later, it's curious, I discovered later that the Cradle of Quakerism is actually quite...
Simon, your audio just cut out, but I think you were just saying, no, I can't hear that. Sol, can you hear?
No, I can't.
I can hear it's not very good.
Okay, that's much better.
Oh yeah.
I have to jiggle the jack plug. Is that okay now?
That's good. I think we got you just up to the point where you were saying that you live near the cradle of Quakerism, which I think is like Bedford or something like that.
It's well, Lancaster is where I am just physically at the moment, and George Fox went up to this region northwest of England, and that's where he found the first band of people that founded Quakerism. The appeal of Quakerism when I was a student was that it has no creed, it has no paid ministers, and there's a lot of this feeling of equality and the lack of hierarchy. That's the important thing, and that really spoke to me because having been aware of the general position of churches, one thing I was keen to get beyond is the sort of hierarchical approach of, the person on top knows best, and we all follow kind of thing.
Yeah.
Quakerism has always been a religion where, well, it is Christian. Fundamentally, George Fox was profoundly Christian, although some people have now gone beyond that, and there are even some non-theists, which I think you would like to bring in later. But Quakerism has always been a practice where basically everybody has access to the truth, the inner light, as it's called. And what happens there's no liturgy either. In other words, on Sunday mornings, which is a bit of throwback to tradition, but on Sunday mornings, Quakers gather for a meeting for worship. And the meeting for worship is entirely unstructured. And sometimes the meeting for worship is entirely silent. Sometimes nothing is said at all. More likely, during meeting for worship, somebody will feel a call to, as we say, minister. They will stand up, they will say something which they feel they're led to say, and then they will sit down again. Nobody will comment on that. Nobody will reply to that directly. Nobody will question it, but they might add their own ministry later. So it's a very, very open practice. Now, when I met Ria, who's also just recently been active on the in this area, the Stower, and also John Vervaeke's things from Flanders, she had been writing this book, Collective Presencing, an Emerging Human Capacity, and I thought, this looks really interesting. I thought so. At the time, it was just in a series of blog posts on WordPress. So I thought, let's put it into one piece. So I put it into one piece so I could read it better, and that proved to be very useful. And so that's what the book that you see today, along with a lot of other tidying up. But I noticed that when I read into the collective presencing practice, although the approach to collective presencing is completely different and not at all religious, what they end up with is something which felt to me very like Quaker practice. In other words, people in a circle, not speaking from their ego, but reaching for something collective. The subtitle: what's possible when people are truly present together, and true presence together is what Quakers also aim for. Quakers, we call it the presence in the midst, and Ria called it the magic in the middle. And I thought, hang on, that's the same thing, even though it comes from a completely different perspective. So that was really the barest outline of the Quaker practice and how I connected with collective presencing. So over to you to ask more questions on that.
Yeah, that's terrific. In my own notes, one of the themes that came out was this idea of light in Quakerism. And, you know, I have a Christian background, I am Christian. And I think one of the surprising things I learned, Simon, was that, as you indicated earlier, that Quakerism isn't necessarily Christian now, as such.
It all depends what you mean by Christian. And that is a big question.
Yeah. And it's not a leading thing. I'm just pointing out, to me, it was surprising because that's one of the things that unfolded as I went along. One of my sources, by the way, was on YouTube, a channel called Quaker Speak, which you probably know about.
I don't know that. Interesting. No, okay. I don't know it.
Well, I gather that it's probably American, around Pennsylvania, where a lot of the Quakers are.
It will be.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And you know, there was a Muslim Quaker, and others, and they sort of carefully made that distinction. But you know, I think your history was very much coming out of Christianity, as far as I could see. So that concept of light is something that struck me, no pun intended.
Inner light.
So is it specifically inner light?
Well, that's the way it comes. That's the way it's spoken of in amongst Quakers usually. Yes, in the sense that it's the light which is present within everyone. That of God, which is often the phrase which is used. That of God in everyone.
Oh, right.
So basically, the Quaker principle is that there is the seed in everyone. It's just a question of how do you reach it, how do you make it present, how do you bring it out. So in other words, we don't need somebody else's light is the important thing, another person's light. There is the light within us, within each one of us. So and other people have said, the inner teacher, for example, is another and yet even though it's inward, it's not purely of the ego, it's not of the self, it's actually from the spirit, and the spirit, I think, is interpreted in a way which is very compatible with other Christian groups. I think the spirit and the spirit, I mean, goodness me, there's been enough theology written about what is the Holy Spirit. A very mysterious concept, I think, but so that's what I think Quakers focus on.
Yeah, I love that. What you're saying about separating the ego from the spirit. It makes me wonder if a large part of your practice has to do with that quietness. Is the practice of separating your ego from what else there could be emerging? Yes,
I think. Ideally, in Quaker practice, in Quaker meeting for worship, you still the mind, quieten the mind, and fundamentally you open yourself. You open yourself to what is coming, and it's both outward and inward. You open yourself to what is there, but then that comes through yourself. It does not come necessarily through. Well, it doesn't come through authority. It can equally come from somebody else's ministry. Somebody else's ministry. Can you say, "Oh, yes, that speaks to my condition"? People have said in the past. Yes, that there's a surprising. I think what people feel so often in a really gathered Quaker meeting is another word which is used very often. In a very gathered Quaker meeting, people notice that when somebody stands up and speaks, what they say is somehow either very relevant to their own condition, or somehow it's something that they might have said themselves. So there's this sort of resonance, if you like, one way of putting it. in the sense and the sense that we are all in touch with this common presence in the middle.
That's amazing. It makes me think of tuning in,
Mm-hmm.
tuning into something other than each individual, maybe.
I mean, from the Christian perspective, you can just say tuning into the Spirit.
Yeah.
That's good enough.
Yeah, look, to be honest with you, in my ignorance, Quakers and Shakers and Puritans and as I was learning, researching for this, Dunkers and various groups formed out of that kind of English Civil War, which is, I think, where a lot of it stemmed from. To me, in my ignorance, I always thought, okay, this is just Christians who were shaking off. Again, there's a pun, but unintended.
Yep.
They were kind of shaking off that kind of immensely dominating church and state presence, which in England in particular must have been incredibly overbearing, and availing themselves of perhaps what they saw in the scriptures through people like George Fox and those sorts of people who I guess at the time were showing a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
And so again, through my eyes, I was thinking, of course, they're quaking because they're going after this experience. So not because a clergyman told me chapter and verse, this is what the truth is, but rather, no, I want to have a touch of something real myself, beyond myself. I want to taste it.
Yep.
And the consequence of that, I imagined, was, people are shaking and all sorts of stuff. I don't know. Is that wrong?
What is the consequence? What is the consequence that we're looking for?
Is that a real question? It's all right.
Yes, that's a real question. A real question. I mean, what? And I think we can take that on two levels. What does an individual look for when they're looking for religion or a religious experience? And secondly, what do we hope that religion is going to, how do we hope that religion is going to function in society? So what is the point of religion?
Right. Oh, okay. So that is a proper question. And what are people seeking when they engage with religion? Is that a fair way of restating it?
Yeah, and I can ask that to both of you.
Yeah.
What are you looking for? What do you look for from, what might you get? You're not necessarily that religion is the only place to get it from, but what kind of things are you looking for when you engage with religion?
Well, not to be cheeky, but I think out of respect for the Quaker style, I'll let Solid answer first and I'll come after you.
Well, it seems to me when I just have a brief overview of all the different religions, what's the consistent point seems to be like something like just quieting the ego and letting the spirit and just our God taking place. Like St. Augustine said, I obey more to God than to myself. I think that's really what people are looking for into religion, and which I guess they missed a lot of the time because it's such a arduous task.
What's the problem for you in just following your ego? Why would that not be why would that not feel right to you personally?
Well, I guess it's just too limiting. You're not connected enough to the rest of the world, or just being identified with the ego.
So are you saying that there's a sense of you're aware of potential of connection, which you don't get just by focusing inside yourself purely? Yeah. Okay. How about you then, Julian?
So I think in thinking about the answer, there's sort of two levels of it for me. And one level of it, the deeper level, which came second, was that without the idea of God, and that's my best word for it, God, without the idea of God, it's all meaningless. In literally for me, that is, I know that's not true for everybody, but for me, it's all pointless. And that's operating at a level within myself that is beyond intellectual, that sense. My second answer to the question was really about that as well, which is, and this is where I think John Vervaeke is very helpful. For me, in the culture in which I grew up, meaning was to be found in intellectual apprehension. And so that kind of pro-scientific conception where, it's only just a matter of time before you understand and then you'll get it. And if you don't get it, well, then you're dumb. And all of the associated pathologies with that structure seemed absurd to me. And for me, seeking a religion was a way to break out of that, even if I found it absurd myself in the seeking.
What did you find absurd?
So to quote Ken Wilber, what I found absurd initially was the trans-rational nature of seeking a truly transcendental experience. So I just qualify that really quickly by saying he makes a very good point, Ken Wilber, the integral theory guy, which is we often make the mistake of saying something's either pre-rational or it's irrational, but we're forgetting this really important space in between, which is I think that which we're talking about, the trans-rational.
As if rational was the only thing, and of course we know that that can't be, because rationality itself is based on, it's not as simple as that at all.
Yeah.
Good. So when you look at can you tell me a bit more about your Christian faith, Julian, and how that works for you?
Sure. I have to hold myself to account when I'm talking to you about this, because I'm conscious that in this whole experience, in this world that we're living in now, where I get to talk to you and Soled, and you're on the other side of the world, there's the pandemic on, and there's all sorts of stuff. That the world is awash in bullshit, to quote John Vervaeke again, and that includes myself. And so one of the things with the Christianity is that I have to hold myself to account for that in myself as much as anything else. So excuse me if I get a little bit emotional at times when I talk about what Christianity means to me, because to me, it's a sacred thing. That's not to say that I'm right, by the way. I'm supremely conscious about that I'm not right. And the closer I draw into what's sacred about it for me, the more immediately I'm impressed with that. So the the biographical side of my Christianity is that I grew up singing in a high Anglican cathedral in Melbourne, in Australia. Yeah, St. Paul's Cathedral. Yeah.
I haven't been there.
Yeah. Look. Oh right. Yeah. I did notice, Simon, your interest in music and on your channel and so on. Can relate to that. Yeah. Look. I got a scholarship thanks to my mum and my dad. They pointed out, you know, if you get into this choir, you get a scholarship to a good school and da da da. There was a workload, so every day after school, from about the age of 8 years old till 15, every day except for Saturday, I would go to the cathedral and we would practice and we would do what's called evensong for half an hour, and all of that was happening at the same time as some trouble in my own little family. And, you know, over the years, I found that choir became a home for me at times when things weren't making sense. And, you know, I had a few intriguing experiences, as you do, you know. You hear the Bible preached, you're mostly ignoring it like every other kid, but you know,
yeah,
if you're feeling particularly vulnerable or down at a certain time and you hear some of the words, it gets through. And I remember comparing and contrasting when I was younger and going, that makes sense to me. For some reason, Simon, one of the things that comes up when I say that is the parable of the sower. I just remember hearing that and thinking, well, that's wise. You know, that's wise. And I want to be like that. As time went on, you know, there's a lot of ritual involved in that kind of church. And eventually I became the head chorister. So it was very hierarchical, very hierarchical. And I wasn't expecting that. It came when I was around about 13 years old or something like that. And that was a profound experience for me. It changed my life. I would be called on at the end of every service to stand up in front of all the boys and, you know, say a prayer or something like that and address what was going on. And one of the things that jumped out is that, you know, one of the boys was, yeah, it's emotional talking about it, but one of the boys was getting picked on. And I remember I felt an urge to defend him from where I was standing. And it turned out that was a powerful thing for him. And, you know, his mum thanked me, I think. And I remember looking at what was going on in my own life. And there was a lot of sort of chaotic feeling going on and seeing what was happening there and just being so very, very conscious that most of this was not to do with me. Because I felt especially unworthy at that time. Especially unworthy. And yet, well, you can see where the sacredness comes from. There's an emotional tie I'll never get rid of. So that's my early story about it. There's much more to tell, but I don't want to hog the space. But thank you for the question. Yeah. May I ask you a question back?
Please.
I was interested to know in your seeking, is that the right word? I'm sorry, you go to a meeting, you're quiet and you're listening. That practice is it called seeking? I can't remember.
No, not particularly. Just, I don't know. In meeting for worship, you mean?
Yeah,
in the actual gathered, just call it meeting for worship, yes.
Have you had experiences which for you were something you'd be willing to share that's not too personal, but that were profound in that sense of what you've asked the question about, what's religion for, and so on.
I wouldn't say I've had any kind of, religious experiences in the way that some people talk about them, sort of like, overwhelming kind of ecstatic experiences or transcendental experiences. I think my experience in meeting for worship is of being present and being in touch and allowing the inner light, allowing the conscience, allowing the spirit to listening basically to what is there, whatever you call it. I have been impressed, as I say, sometimes with the way that occasionally, not a very common experience, but I've been impressed by how what other people say speaks to me. And I think sometimes, the experience of having something to say, of being given something to say, is quite I'm not sure what the word is. Quite humbling and also quite powerful. Like I have to get up and say this. I don't really know what words to use, and maybe I go over some things in my mind, and maybe something gels and something doesn't. And I think, okay. And then you wait for the right moment, and you think, okay, now there is this urge, get up and say this. That's quite a profound experience, however it happens. And I think afterwards, sometimes it's not by no means universal, but sometimes after meeting for worship, when you're having refreshments or whatever and just chatting, people sometimes come up to you, or I sometimes come up to somebody else and say, thank you for that ministry, it really spoke to me. And it does sometimes. I don't think my religious experience it's not a sort of fancy, flashy one, of that kind of it's not psychedelic, it's not kind of transcendental in that sense. It's more just getting in touch with reality and allowing oneself sometimes to hold a mirror up and say, what am I doing? Is this in silence? There's no escape from your conscience. I think we escape a lot. Most people escape a lot by distracting themselves by social media, maybe, or as it was television and now it's social media. There's great power in silence in that. A phrase that you used earlier, Julian, holding me to account. And I think that's a lot of it. It's you're letting whatever process it is work inside you to connect things up, to allow in what you too often shut out, to allow in, to allow truth. I suppose that's truth is a great centerpiece of Quaker thinking.
Wow.
I think that's my answer for the moment, but you can come back if you want.
Well, I want to give space to Solid. I mean, I feel like we're talking about something really sacred. Maybe you want to say something, Solid.
Yeah, actually, I was wondering if that meaning was a universal Quaker practice, or is it just on your branch of what you're doing or participating in?
I won't speak for universal Quaker practice because there isn't really. I mean, there are some people that use the Quaker name that are effectively like many other Protestant churches, that have a pastor and a service. But I think in France, unfortunately, there's not much Quakerism, and on the continent, there's not a lot either. I don't know why it's mainly Anglophone places. In Africa, there's apparently quite a lot of churches that are called Quaker, but it's not necessarily our kind of Quakerism. So I'm not sure about the universality, but I think within the British Quaker tradition, it's quite common to have that kind of sense.
And that's the tradition you're part of, the British one?
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
And that meaning that you're talking about, is that the crucial part of the?
What sort of meaning? I mean, can you just tell me what you heard?
What you were saying, which of the non-hierarchic ministry where you still the mind and just anyone can let it speak. Is that the crucial part of the?
That's the essence. The essence of Quaker worship is the silent meeting. The essence of a silent meeting for worship is indeed that there is no structure, there is no ritual, there is simply sitting in a circle and waiting if and when somebody is called to speak. There are no prayers, there is no songs, there is no.
And that's the only way your tradition participate together in community?
Yes.
Okay. Oh wow.
Yes. I mean that's basically every in an active meeting that happens every week. I mean there's some smaller meetings, it's less frequent, but an active meeting like this one in Lancaster, they hold an hour-long meeting for worship every week. And then the other interesting thing, of course, is that because there are no paid ministers, the business has to be done by everybody collectively as well. So every month there tends to be a meeting for business. And the interesting thing in Quakers is that we call it a meeting for worship for business. So in other words, the business is done. It is meant to be done. I'm not saying it always happens, but the idea is that the business is done in the same spirit as the meeting for worship. Put aside your own ego. Yes, you bring your contribution. You say what you start with, what your starting point is, your opinion, if you like, but then you leave it at that. And so, for example, there is a custom of not speaking more than once to any particular point of business. And what happens then is the clerk, who is just somebody who is basically volunteering to actually to write the minutes. The clerk then puts together a minute, and then that's read out. And then the question is, does this express the sense of the meeting? And the sense of the meeting is a little bit difficult to define, but basically what the clerk is trying to do is the clerk is trying to get a sense of what is the collective What is there in the collective consciousness? What is the collective will? The Clarke is trying to express in words what the collective decision is, not what any particular individual says, and certainly not what they think, but what and the collective will appears as people contribute, as people add, as people say, have you thought about this, or how about that, and this is what my experience, and that's my experience. So I think that's another important point about Quaker practice, is that it's not only the meeting for worship, which is just completely open, but it's also the meeting for worship for business, where you have you have to look after the meeting house, you have to, do lots of practical things, and those things as well get done in the same spirit.
Yeah.
I think there's something I really like about the way you do things, which is the great respect for individual dignity that seems just ensconced in the practice itself. That you can't take too many steps forward without respecting your sister or your brother, so to speak.
I think that's right. Everybody has access to the Spirit. Everybody has that seed, that of God in them. Everybody has their own light, and you cannot dismiss anybody. I think there's a famous story. I don't know whether it's true or not, but or how true it is. But the Quakers in Pennsylvania, when they were meeting the native indigenous people there, I can't remember which way around it was, but there was a recognition that, yes, that's what we do as well, and so there was a very clear recognition that these people are equally in touch with the Spirit, equally children of God, if you like. And so that's one of the reasons why Quakers were, you probably know from John Woolman and people, Quakers were leaders in the campaign against slavery, for example. Sadly speaking, some Quakers were also slave owners, but but at least collectively, Quakers got round to being leaders in the abolition of slavery and and equality of respect for different races and so forth, and indeed genders as well. I mean, Quakers have been very positive in the sense of there's no I mean, one of the sad things about some Christian sects is that you still have this distinction between only men are allowed to be priests. Unfortunately, that's gone in a lot of there's some difference. That men are special in a way that women aren't. What a load of nonsense. I mean, but that's how people have interpreted it, unfortunately. So I think that's one of the other things I really like about the Quaker tradition, is that how they really take equality seriously.
Oh, absolutely.
And as you say, equality, respect for each individual.
Yeah, that's no small thing. I mean, that's almost everything. And the opposite is also true. That the disregard for the dignity of others is the cause of many long-standing strifes in the world. Solid, I hope I didn't jump.
That's not to speak, yeah.
Please go ahead, yeah.
Please.
Solid, I hope I didn't jump on where you were going, by the way.
No, that's fine,
One way to tie your own country, Solid, in with what Simon said, something very powerful earlier, and I wish I got it exactly, but when you were talking, Simon, about the profundity of what happens when you are in meeting and you're faced with your own conscience, excuse me. It reminded me of that well-known quote from Blaise Pascal, a Frenchman, who said, you know, something like, I'm paraphrasing, but most of man's problems come from his inability to sit quietly in a room by himself. Something to that.
And that was even back then, wasn't it? It's even worse now.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I think that's one of the things which is worth mentioning about the experience of Quaker Meeting for Worship, which I do recommend, by the way. If you haven't actually experienced a live Quaker Meeting for Worship, then when coronavirus allows, do, you know. It's the quality of silence is a very accepting silence.
Yeah.
How can you? And it's strange to say the quality of the silence, but you know, silence has a quality to it. Different silences have quality to it. Some silence is the silence of fear. There is a silence which is the silence of fear. I dare not say anything, because if I say anything, I will be judged, criticized, blamed. And the Quaker silence is completely the opposite. The Quaker silence is a very accepting silence. It feels like anybody really, there is room for anybody to speak. There is no distinction as to worthiness of whether you're worthy or not to minister. Everybody is assumed to be worthy of ministry. To minister. It's just a question of whether you actually feel the call to minister or not. And so just to go a bit beyond Pascal, you know, it's not just the ability to sit in silence with yourself, but it's also the ability to sit in silence with others in a circle. And that's something that comes up in collective presencing as well, you know, that from a purely secular point of view, you know, there is a practice of being able to not needing to jump in there, to give space, to listen without needing to respond, and to accept a reflective silence, an accepting silence when it feels right to do that as well. Because I think the opposite. Too often, somebody says something, and somebody will jump in and say, "No, that's wrong," or "No, that's, you know, I think differently." Well, no, you don't want to do that. You listen, and even in Quaker circles, there's this tradition of if something doesn't speak to you, maybe it speaks to somebody else, you know. So maybe what you hear says, that doesn't make any sense to me, but you don't know. It may be making a lot of sense to somebody else. You might be speaking very personally to somebody else. So it's not for you to discount something or to undervalue or to put aside or to dismiss something that somebody else says. That's not a good idea, because it's too often just mistaken. And again, based on your own ego-centered structures, your own way of thinking. Yes, this doesn't make any sense to me, but hang on, this is just me. And there are lots of other people that make sense of the world in different ways. Back to your original point, Julian, about meaning. I think people with no meaning, people who are really lost, I discovered this when I was a student, actually, very interestingly. I kind of came to, discovered is the wrong word, but I kind of recognized this in myself when I was a student, in my student years, that people that are very insecure and have no meaning in their lives they appreciate somebody telling them what the meaning of life is. And that's where you get the kind of evangelical position, you know, oh, feel lost? Hey, we have the answers, you know, you just have to listen to us. We tell you the answers. But then you grow a bit and you think, well, hang on, we've all got answers, and all our answers are potentially different. We all come at things from a different perspective. But then the really worthwhile place to go from that is to listen. Yes, you have your answers at the moment, but if you listen hard, if you listen deeply to what other people have to say, then that deepens your own understanding. I think, oh, and sometimes it challenges your own understanding. Sometimes you're stuck in a particular worldview. Sometimes you're stuck with a particular model of how things work. But when you really listen, you think, oh, okay, maybe that's not right for everybody. Maybe that's not the only way of thinking about it. And it's one of the things that's in this sort of set of related Discord groups that we're kind of part of. It's something that comes up quite a lot. This kind of talking across the divide, and you know, like polarization in society only is maintained because people will not actually listen to people from the other side. They get dismissed before being listened to. And that's one thing that we can do, is we can listen respectfully. Respectfully doesn't quite get it, but it's like respectfully. We can listen from the heart to what other people are saying, and not just what they're saying, but where they're coming from, what they're meaning, what the spirit is behind what they're saying. And that can lead to insight into what they are, and also lead to insight into to give us more insight into where we could be as well. Something like that.
So much in what you said. There's so many things popping up for me. I'll just let Solid have a go first.
No, that's fine. You go ahead.
Merci.
Yeah.
So many things. I think the thing that emerges the most, Simon, out of listening to your practice, is that expression that is in the Old Testament, the still small voice of God.
Ah, yes. Elijah on Mount Carmel. Yes. No, Elijah not in Mount Carmel. Elijah no, it's somewhere else. Elijah, yes, I know what you mean, yes. Okay,
yeah. I don't know if that factors in, but it just comes through loudly. I mean, again, excuse the expression. But
well, it comes through very quietly, maybe.
But I mean, it strikes me. I'm reminded of that, and even to Solid's earlier point about the world we live in is so noisy. The media world that we live in, you know, and to your point too, Simon, about the appeal of the, let's say, the proactive evangelical message. Is that we are dunked from childhood in a non-stop messaging environment that will not stop telling us, do this, do that, buy this, don't buy that, etc. And I'm probably getting a little bit into my personal project by going down that path, but the net effect of that enormous apparatus, especially for the vulnerable, I particularly care about children who don't have parents to protect them from it, is that you are just in your weaker moments going to be taken up with one of those messages. If you don't have a kind of practice, and this is where hopefully what we're talking about is useful into these communities that we're trying to serve into, is encouraging the kinds of practices where you do connect to your inner light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that is the only way forward. One of the other, there's two things I wanted to put out there, then I'll hand back over. And one thing that really struck me. Yeah, please.
Excuse me, I've just got a call.
Yeah, no problem.
But so, are you interested in bringing collective presencing to the Retnor community?
Do you mean Simon?
Or you? Is that?
I just have to go for a minute. Let somebody in. Hang on.
No problem. So I don't know anything about it, Solid, to be honest.
Okay.
It is something which is the province of Simon's partner, Ria. She's fostering that practice.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I wonder if it could be done like the way that this community does things through Zoom and Discord and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or it's I don't know. It seems that being in the same place together is maybe a crucial part of the practice, though.
Yeah. I don't want to speak to it too much. I think that Simon is clearly much more practiced than I am.
Yeah.
I'm used to being quiet on my own.
Yeah.
I quite like it. But the doing it as a practice together and being quiet, it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. A great idea.
Yeah.
In my own faith, there is a way of doing this, which Simon was talking to a little bit earlier about the Holy Spirit and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure if you've had any experience with that kind of thing, but I've had some practice. What we would say, like listening to the Spirit or something like that.
And what, by yourself? Is that a solo practice?
Yeah, look, I do that by myself. That's when I'm praying. To me, that's the mechanism by which my prayers would be working. So in the Christian sense, the Holy Spirit is called the helper. I think that's the original Greek word, is the helper. So there's a kind of agency that's outside of yourself there.
Yeah.
But my earlier practice was very much involved with other people seeking to hear that. I think it's very much the same as that what Simon was talking about, waiting, and
yeah.
So, yeah. Have you had any experiences with that yourself, Solid?
With the on that
presencing?
No, I couldn't say no, not really.
Yeah.
I don't have a Christian background at all.
Sure.
But but I'm quite interested in it, though. I think because I think that it's so much part of our cultural background that it's those, I think those types of practices could be much more profound and for people from our culture, because people tend to go towards more Eastern practices, and I'm just not quite sure that because of their own Eastern cultural metaphysics and whatnot, I'm not sure that it's actually appropriate for us that much.
Oh, right, yeah. And I suppose in France, you're kind of surrounded by this culture and architecture that's just steeped in Christianity.
Yeah. Oh, that for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really interested in trying to learn more about Christianity and prayers and practices in the communities. And so that's I think the Quakers' practice of meaning is, I mean, yeah, that's really powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And no, I think for sure it's really, it always breaks my heart to when you see how to some degree how lost our culture is when you hear about those practices and just those communities. It's really sad that people I mean, I can sense that people are missing that, and most of them really don't know that they're missing such a powerful of stealing the mind and being together silent, and those types of things. And it seems so hard it seems so hard to bring it about, just how could you just start a community and just start, I guess you have to some point. Yeah,
I agree with you, Solid. I love what you're saying. I mean, it's so deeply valuable, and at the same time, for that very reason, it is missing. I don't say that with an agenda. I genuinely feel like people are cutting themselves off from their own internal resources.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's exactly John Vervaeke's whole appeal, and that's why people like what he's doing, and so.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
There is perhaps someone you'd also find helpful, because I'm very conscious of not trying to bias the conversation toward Christianity. That's not what this community is about.
Yeah.
I want to declare my own kind of background and be clear about it, but there's no message, there's no agenda to push there. But there is a fellow who I think you'd find helpful to listen to. His name is Rupert Sheldrake, and he's
sure, I've heard of him.
Okay, so he's got that book, Science and Spiritual Practices.
All right, I've never read that though.
Well, he talks about 7 spiritual practices that, regardless, I think, of what religion you're coming from, have this kind of positive, scientific, if you will, effect on you. And I think the one that sprung to mind when I'm talking to you is pilgrimage.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. Well, that's actually something I've been thinking about a lot, going on a because I love going on treks and whatnot, and I think going on a like a really monthly, really more arduous one, I would be really interested in that.
Yeah,
but it's really weird that you would say that.
Yeah, maybe check out what he's got to say on YouTube. But I think to start you off, Solid, the interesting thing about Rupert Sheldrake is that he was an atheistic scientist who then converted back to Christianity in an Indian ashram, which was run by a Benedictine monk or something like that.
Not something like Thomas Merton or somebody, was it?
Oh, was it like Father Bede? Father Bede. But
can I just say I think I'd better go
because
I got the gas man here. So
absolutely.
But lovely to talk to you both. So thank you.
Thank you.
Simon, is it okay if this gets put on to YouTube by the Discord?
Sure. I don't think many people watch it, but yes, no problem.
Even so, can I just say I really deeply thank you for your willingness to talk, especially since you don't know me from Adam. And I just really deeply appreciate you giving your attention in your time.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks for asking. Cheers. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, so back to Sheldrake. And he calls himself what's known as an atheist, not as in an atheist, but an atheist. So it's like you were an atheist and now you're back to theism, something like that. And back to pilgrimage, he's just saying, you know, he realized how much in his own culture, in Britain, there's just this, you know, really long, deep tradition of sacredness and
sacred,
sacred
and sacred sites and all,
yeah. And so he will, you know, go on these pilgrimages to different cathedrals around Britain, and they just part of the experience is probably just walking through the countryside together, and enjoying the land in which you live in, maybe.
And stopping at the different churches or whatnot, and meeting the people, and staying with them and talking with them. I think that's such an important part as well.
Perhaps you're right. Yeah. I don't know, but I really like the way he's going about it. And as I say, I mean, you can approach it as a scientist and look at it from that lens, in terms of your own inquiry, which would be helpful. For some reason, I wanted to ask you: is your region where you're living anywhere near Languedoc? The Languedoc region?
No, that's the opposite actually. I'm top north, and that Languedoc is top south west.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why I feel prompted to ask you that question, but
that's all right.
That seems to be a region which is very, very deep, and it's got a deep and rich history too. I'm not sure.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know who said that, but everywhere you walk in Europe, you know, it's just history everywhere. Yeah. That's pretty crazy, man. That's pretty crazy.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. My mum comes from Prague.
Oh, well, yeah.
So, yeah,
that's a really beautiful city.
It is, and the history there too. It's everywhere, and Oh, good.
Yeah, it's really weird. I remember being there, and it's really weird, like trying to be present of all the every step you make. It's this like thousands of years before you that people were stepping here, and it's a really weird experience.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I appreciate your sort of your inquiring mind about it. You seem open-minded and fair-minded, which is great. That's a quality required.
Yeah, I know. I think most of the people seem that way on the server. It's a really neat community, I think, and I'm actually just new to it, and I really want to learn more of the people here, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Partly the reason I wanted to do this today was to foster more of a sense of that. I think everybody's trying to work out the protocol of, you know, I feel a bit scared to share too much, or maybe people aren't listening to me or seeing what I'm giving. And, you know, I think I went through all those emotions, and I'm sure other people are as well.
Yeah. But, for sure.
Yeah.
That was a good idea. Good idea. Have you been on the server for a long time?
Not really. Maybe a bit longer than a month or more.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I've been following what John Vervaeke's done for about a year, probably ever since he did the meaning crisis thing.
Yeah.
And it just was impossible to ignore. And one of the areas that I am feeling compelled about is the religion that's not a religion idea.
Yeah.
You know, that's a really big idea.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to come to grips with it in an honest way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
How about yourself? What's your story a little bit, Solid?
Well, my story is kind of weird. I'm 22 years old, so like 4 years ago, I started college, and really I wasn't about any of this at all and whatnot. I was just kind of like just going through life like regularly, I guess, like most people,
Mhm.
not really thinking about anything. But and so when I came across, I did so I just went to college for started my first year in geology, and because I had to do something, it's really sad how there's no direction for kids around kids here, and you expect them to make just such big choices for their life, like just like then really think about it. It's really crazy. And so I know I was kind of lost, I guess, in consciously to some degree, because and I mean I like geology, but that's not really what I wanted to do with my life or anything. And so for some reason, I don't know why, I came across some like conspiracy theories and whatnot, and that really shook me, like because it was really directed towards more kind of the loss of spirituality in the world, and like how the government and is kind of like manipulating people to not think on their own and whatnot. And so that really struck me, because at the time, I mean, I didn't have any critical thinking, so it was just it was just really powerful for me to learn that you could actually learn to think by yourself and not just accept like how things are and whatnot. And so, of course, it put me in a weird position with school and whatnot. So I just kind of stopped and just started reading as much as I could and getting information and I had to get a job. And so that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 3 years since the COVID. It's just trying to learn about stuff and whatnot. And then and then now I'm because of the COVID, I had to stop working because there was just things stopped. So now I've been unemployed, and so I've been thinking about probably going back to school and get a degree in philosophy and whatnot. I've been really interested in philosophy since since learning. Well, yeah, because I mean, because the conspiracy kind of mindset kind of went away after a while. It was just it was just the how to say, like the difference between like having the sense of having no direction and not being able to like to think and just accepting kind of things blindly, just going like this kind of cultural routine, just kind of following it without thinking about yourself. And just this distinction, it was really really weird for me. Like I wasn't expecting at all. It really shook me kind of strongly to get on my own kind of journey.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing the story so clearly. I mean, did you find yourself going along with those conspiracy theories, Solid, and at some point you struck something that seemed wrong, or?
Well, I mean, I guess I was I was really interested in it, and I just I mean, and I knew because I guess I was lucky that it was kind of how presented in a way that you have to think that this is what you would come to the conclusion if you were thinking by yourself. And so that's really what like I I was oriented towards, is like trying to start to think about myself. And so of course after a while, when you get more information, you realize it's they have a conspiracy. I mean, most conspiracy theorists, they have their own like dogmas and whatnot. So they're not. So it's kind of it's kind of weird thing. Then I really, I mean, it's like a dog, like any dogma really.
Right.
It's like putting blinders on, and you see all the I mean, you're the one making the connections basically between all those weird things and whatnot.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. So you're reading for yourself. You kind of arming yourself to discern truth from falsity, the true from the false.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Noam Chomsky. You know much about Chomsky?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I know him, but I don't know much about him.
Yeah, I like Chomsky a lot. He back in the 1960s. I think this is pertinent to what we're talking about. He wrote a book called Manufacturing Consent, and the manufacturing consent was all about how media and different institutions like that have an effect on you. But the point I'm trying to make was really what his solution was, which I think the way he put it was, we need to teach ourselves intellectual self-defense.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and it's so it was really powerful for me from the get-go how culture was lacking that in such a big way. And then as I get deeper with different, like going into different philosophies and Jung and more Eastern philosophy and Peterson and Vervaeke, then really I became more oriented towards the spiritual religious side that we're missing.
Right.
And so that's what I'm really interested in right now. Yeah, and so that's and I agree that I think the Red Nor is really, it seems crazy. Like when I think about it, sometimes it seems really crazy. Like how could you go about creating a new religion? Well,
right.
I mean, which is not a religion, but yeah, you see what I mean. But I think it's probably the way to go, because I don't see really any different way that things could. I mean, I don't know if there's any other solution real. Yeah.
I'm being really careful about the religion that's not a religion. I believe John Vervaeke is acting in really good faith about it. I think the best frame that I can put it in for myself is that his thesis is, well, the steady decline of religion over the centuries led to the rise of political ideologies, which themselves sort of yielded results which were even more horrific. And so he's sort of proposing, well, what we need to do is come to neither this nor that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
As far as I understand it, Solid, that's the starting point where he's coming from. But, maybe people watching this in the community will correct me. But I won't say too much about it until I'm more confident I know what utility it might have, even for Christians. I was talking with Brett, who runs the administration of the server.
Yeah.
And we had a quick chat about it, and I think we tended to agree that maybe one of the benefits of having something like this religion that's not a religion would be to improve the quality of existing religions anyway. Because please, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I never thought about that. Because
it makes a lot of sense to me, because if say you're a Christian, Solet, and you're living in whatever 1920 or something like that, you're still going to be believing in evolution probably, and the theory of gravity, and it has nothing to do with what your faith belief is on its own. Your faith belief is going to be informed by a certain inner sense of what fits for you and that sort of thing. I tend to put this religion that's not a religion in that category, which is it's going to be enormously informed by cognitive science and philosophy and, John Vervaeke's model, undoubtedly. And if a Buddhist or a Hindu takes up the good sides of those things, and that helps them to practice their religion or our religion in a more beneficial way, then good.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way I can view what it's for.
Okay, yeah, sure, yeah. Well, the way I saw it was that the point would be to like try to get back, like at to me, that's the way I understood it. Is that the point would be to get back what religion did, but like in a new kind of scientifically updated modern way, I think.
Yeah.
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 And so, because I mean, our whole culture, the whole culture used to be just this deep in religion and the communities and whatnot, and that's we definitely lost that, I think, and so yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, it makes sense that it's a big part of what's going on right now is just being so kind of divided and lost, and yeah.
Right. Absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're raising some good questions, and I'm going to have to go in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good place for us to finish up because of all of the questions that have to do with it. So what you said, like, I think what you said sounds right from what I've understood as well, which is John Vervaeke is trying to reverse engineer religion.
Yeah.
The same way that he reverse engineered enlightenment. And God knows I learned a ton by that process. But by the same token, I'm religious. So what am I going to do? Is the God of the religion that is not a religion non-theism? As far as I can tell, that might be the case.
Yeah.
And for me, like, to be honest, non-theism doesn't worry me at all. My own experience of God, when I see God, is very non-theistic. It's like there's no words. It shatters all of my kind of mental models of everything. It's just like a big old relaxed, restful nothing. So if that's non-theism, not a problem. That's okay with me. But, there's a lot of, when you're religious, depending on how you go about it, okay, you're making real vows to God. You're saying, like, I need your help. I'm asking for your help. And you sort of learning about it and you're going, okay, what's required of me so that I can help myself to move forward and those sorts of things. And I can speak personally, I meant that when I said it, and I feel grateful for it. So this kind of project, the religion that's not a religion, stirs up those kinds of deeply held things, and I'm wrestling with it. And as I said to one of the other guys on the server, I can't remember who, it was Jarvis from Tasmania here in Australia. I said, I feel like I'm about a year away from really having some firm position on what's going on there.
For sure. I can understand.
Well, okay. If it's all right with you, I'm going to stop the recording and finish up on my end. Is there anything you wanted to add on before we stop?
Yeah, no, sure. That was thank you for setting that up. That was quite interesting, and I think Simon was he was he had really powerful things to say.